Congresswoman Waters, I must inform you that the Federal Bureau of Investigation has been actively conducting a clandestine and comprehensive inquiry into your professional and financial activities for the duration of the past 18 months. A silence so profound and absolute that it felt heavy enough to crush the air out of the room descended instantly, lingering for a heartbeat before the atmosphere shattered into absolute chaos. The words spoken by FBI Director Kash Patel struck the hearing room of the House Financial Services Committee with the visceral and disorienting impact of a flashbang grenade detonating in a confined space. One moment, the proceedings were conducting business as usual with the typical mundane rhythm of a judicial oversight hearing, and in the very next second, the room had dissolved into utter pandemonium. Maxine Waters froze mid-sentence, the prepared attack she had meticulously crafted regarding Patel's purported politicization of the Bureau, dying instantly in her throat. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened once again in a futile attempt to speak, yet no words emerged from the woman who had spent decades grilling bank CEOs on national television and who had never once in her career deprived for a sharp retort, now sitting there completely speechless. Patel reached into his dossier and retrieved a single sheet of paper, holding it aloft for the cameras and the committee to see. "We are in possession of your emails, Congresswoman." And as he spoke, the color drained from Waters' face, leaving her visibly pale. On September 11th, 2008, Patel's voice was calm, clinical, and deadly in its precision. "You sent an email to your husband regarding One United Bank, the very institution in which he had invested $500,000, the bank that was on the precipice of failure, and the bank whose collapse would have effectively wiped out your family's accumulated wealth. You wrote in that correspondence, 'I have arranged a meeting with the Treasury Department for Friday, and I am going to push hard for them to include One United in the TARP bailout program, because we cannot let the bank fail as there is too much at stake.'" The room erupted with a cacophony of noise as members began shouting, cameras flashed incessantly, and media personnel scrambled to capture the moment. Patel kept reading, his voice rising in volume and intensity to cut through the mounting noise. 3 months later, in December of 2008, after One United had successfully received $12 million in taxpayer bailout money, you sent another email stating, "Good news. One United received $12 million from TARP. Kevin called to thank me, and this will protect our investment. Crisis averted. So let's plan a vacation to celebrate." He looked up from the paper and stared directly at Waters with an unblinking gaze. "Protect our investment." Those were your words, meaning you did not save a community bank for the sake of the public, but rather you saved your family's money, using $12 million in taxpayer funds by leveraging your powerful position on this committee. And that, Congresswoman, established bank fraud. Chairman McHenry's gavel banged uselessly against the dais, the sound lost in the uproar, while Waters' lawyers, who seemed to have appeared out of thin air, were suddenly surrounding her and whispering frantically into her ear. But Patel was not done, and he pulled out more papers, more emails, and more evidence from his stack. While you were actively committing bank fraud, you were simultaneously funneling campaign money to your daughter, totaling $2 million over the course of 20 years for what appears to be fake consulting work that voters clearly say they never saw or received. And while you were engaged in that scheme, you were also accepting money from shell companies, receiving wire transfers from entities that existed for a mere 6 months before vanishing into thin air, totaling $1.8 million that you never reported, never disclosed, and never explained. 15 different banks filed suspicious activity reports on your accounts. The IRS found unexplained income on which you never paid taxes, and the Treasury Department's money laundering unit flagged your activities. He leaned forward, his demo intensification as he delivered the blow. You have spent 32 years on this committee investigating financial crimes, demanding accountability from others, and positioning yourself as a watchdog. But you are not a watchdog, Congresswoman. You are a criminal. Bank fraud, campaign finance violations, money laundering, false statements, perjury, amounting to 34 federal felonies. Waters finally found her voice, though it was shaky and desperate, shouting that this is retaliation, this is racist, and this is a political witch hunt. Patel interrupted her, his voice as hard as steel. This investigation was opened 9 months ago. I even became FBI director. It was initiated by career agents based on referrals from the Treasury's Financial Crimes Unit and based on 15 suspicious activity reports filed by the very banks who saw your transactions and concluded that this looks like money laundering. This isn't political, Congresswoman. This is evidence. And we have 18 months of it, including your own emails, your own bank records, and your own lies on federal disclosure forms. You committed crimes. We caught you. The chamber exploded into absolute chaos. But through it all, one image dominated every camera feed. Maxine Waters, sitting frozen at her desk, surrounded by panicked lawyers, her decades-long career destroyed in moments by FBI Director Kash Patel, reading her own words back to her. This will protect our investment, she had written, and she had indeed protected her investment. But she could not protect herself from the evidence, and Patel had a lot more evidence to present. To understand this moment, we must look back to where it began. Jennifer Chen had been staring at the same pattern of transactions for 3 hours. She was a financial analyst for FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is the Treasury Department's anti-money laundering unit. Her job was reviewing suspicious activity reports that banks filed when they spotted transactions that looked wrong, such as drug dealers structuring cash deposits to avoid reporting requirements, terrorist groups moving money through shell companies, or corrupt foreign guards hiding stolen funds. She had seen it all in her career, but this pattern was different because this wasn't some foreign dictator or cartel boss. This was a United States Congresswoman. "Hey, Marcus, come look at this," she called out to her colleague Marcus Rodriguez, who rolled his chair over to her station. "What have you got?" he asked. Maxine Waters, representative from California, 15 suspicious activity reports over the past 6 years, and all showing the exact same pattern. She pulled up the reports on her screen to show him. Large cash deposits, always just under $10,000 to avoid the automatic trigger. Wire transfers from shell companies in Delaware and Nevada, and payments from entities that dissolve 6 months after making the transfer, which are classic money laundering indicators. Marcus whistled low and asked, "A congresswoman? Are you sure? The accounts are in her name, her husband's name, and her daughter's name, and get this, she sits on the House Financial Services Committee. She literally regulates the banks that are filing these reports." "Oh, that is not good," Marcus replied. "It gets worse," Jennifer said. "Remember that One United Bank thing from 2008? The TARP bailout controversy?" "Vaguely," Marcus said. "She helped some banks get bailout money. Her husband owned stock in the bank. She arranged the meeting with Treasury. They got $12 million in TARP funds, and she got a slap on the wrist from the House Ethics Committee." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "So we have current suspicious activity, a history of using her position for personal financial benefits and overseeing authority over the banking system. This needs to go to the FBI." Marcus hesitated, saying, "Jen, investigating a member of Congress is radioactive, especially someone like Waters. The political blowback will be immense. Marcus, if this was anyone else, if this was a city councilman or a local businessman, we would refer it immediately. Are you saying we don't investigate because she is powerful?" He sobbed and said, "No, you are right. Write it up, send it to the director, and let him make the call." Jennifer spent the next 2 days compiling everything. The 15 SARs, the One United history, public records, showing Waters' net worth had grown from $500,000 to over $6 million on a congressional salary, and her daughter's company receiving over $1 million in campaign funds. The report was 40 pages long, and the conclusion was 3 words: refer to the FBI. Special Agent Michael Torres looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. And in fact, he hadn't. For 72 hours, he had been reading the FinCEN referral on Maxine Waters, reading it, rereading it, and checking every fact because investigating a sitting member of Congress, especially one as prominent and powerful as Waters, required absolute certainty. His team was assembled in a secure conference room consisting of 6 agents, 3 forensic accountants, and 2 DOJ witnesses from the Public Integrity Section. "All right," Torres said, standing at the front of the room. "Let's be very clear about what we are doing here and how we are doing it. We have a FinCEN referral indicating systematically suspicious financial activity by Representative Maxine Waters, her husband Sidney Williams, and her daughter Karen Waters. The activity includes cash deposits structured to avoid reporting requirements, wire transfers from shell companies, significant unexplained wealth growth, a history of using her congressional position to benefit a bank her family invested in, and campaign payments to her daughter's company that don't match any real services. That is enough to open an investigation. But," he emphasizes the word, "this is politically sensitive. Waters is powerful. She is connected. She will claim this is racist and sexist political persecution. The media will scream, and Democrats will investigate us. So we do this by the book. We follow evidence only. We document everything. We make no assumptions. We tell no one outside this room. And if the evidence shows crimes, we prosecute. If it doesn't, we close it quietly." "Everyone clear?" he asked. And nods went around the room. "Good. Let's start with public record stuff we can get without subpoenas, such as financial disclosures, campaign finance reports, and property records. Then we will decide if we need grand jury process." For 6 months, they worked in secret. They pulled every financial disclosure Waters had filed since 1991, totaling 33 years of reports. They pulled campaign finance records showing payments to her daughter's company totaling over $1 million since 2003. They pulled property records showing multiple real estate holdings, including a $6 million mansion in Los Angeles. They pulled news archives documenting the One United controversy. And what they found was a pattern: wealth that couldn't be explained by reported income, payments to family members that didn't match actual services, real estate acquisitions that didn't align with disclosed assets, and a history of ethical violations that had been swept under the rug. Torres walked into his supervisor's office and stated, "We need grand jury subpoenas for bank records, tax returns, and emails, the full package." His supervisor, a careful man who had been with the Bureau for 25 years, looked at him seriously and asked, "You are sure about this? You are absolutely certain this isn't political?" "Sir, if Maxine Waters was Mary Johnson, a city councilwoman from nowhere, we would have opened this case a year ago. The only reason we are hesitating is because she is powerful, but the evidence doesn't care about power, and neither should we." "All right," the supervisor said, "draft the subpoenas, and I will take them to the U.S. Attorney." The subpoenas went out, and what came back was devastating. Torres sat in the FBI director's office, briefing Kash Patel on a case that could explode into the biggest political scandal in years. Patel had been director for 2 months, was a former federal prosecutor and former House Intelligence Committee investigator, known for being thorough, aggressive, and fearless when it came to corruption, and he was exactly the kind of director who wouldn't bury an investigation for political reasons. "Walk me through it," Patel said. Torres opened his briefing book and began. "We have been investigating Representative Maxine Waters for 18 months, and the case is solid. Bank fraud, campaign finance violations, false statements, money laundering indicators, We have emails, bank records, witness testimony, IRS analysis, and it is overwhelming. If she weren't a congresswoman, we would have been indicted a year ago. What is the bank fraud? Patel asked. 2008 financial crisis. Her husband owned up to $500,000 in stock in a bank called One United. The bank was failing. She arranged a meeting with Treasury officials, participated in the meeting, advocated for the bank to get TARP bailout funds, and never disclosed that her husband owned the stock. The bank received $12 million. We have emails where she tells her husband she is going to push hard for the bailout. And after they got it, she emails him saying, "This will protect our investment." Patel made a note and asked, "She admitted in writing she did it for the money." "Yes, sir." "What else?" "Campaign finance fraud." Her daughter owns a company called Progressive Connections, and since 2003 Waters campaigns have paid that company over $1.2 million for slate mailer services. We analyzed the expenses, and the actual work costs may be $18,000 per election cycle, yet she is paying six figures, and the excess goes directly to her daughter as personal income. We interviewed voters and most never received any slate mailers, meaning the company exists solely to funnel campaign money to family. Money laundering. 1. $8 million in unexplained deposits to family accounts over 15 years. Wire transfers from shell companies in Delaware and Nevada that dissolve shortly after making payments, cash deposits structured just under reporting thresholds, and 15 separate suspicious activity reports from banks indicating classic laundering indicators. Her net worth went from $500,000 in 2004 to $4 million today on a congressional salary of $174,000. The math doesn't work, and the IRS can't account for where the money came from. Patel leaned back and asked what DOJ says. Public Integrity reviewed the case twice, and they said it is prosecutable, strong evidence, felonies, but they are waiting for your sign-off given the subject's position. Patel thought for a long moment. Maxine Waters was powerful and prominent, and any investigation would be called racist, sexist, and political, and the blowback would be intense. But the evidence was there, and if the FBI didn't prosecute powerful Democrats when they committed crimes, what message did that send? She chairs the Financial Services Committee, right? Patel asked. Ranking member now, as Republicans, has the majority, but yes, she is senior leadership on the committee, and that committee oversees the FBI and holds our budget hearings. Yes, sir. Patel smiled grimly and said, "Then let's do this in the most transparent way possible. I have a scheduled oversight hearing with Financial Services in 6 weeks. Instead of just indicting her quietly, I will present the evidence publicly at her own committee hearing and let the American people see what we found. Then DOJ files charges immediately after." Torres blinked and said, "Sir, that is going to be explosive." "Good," Patel replied, "because I am tired of people claiming the FBI protects powerful Democrats. We are going to show everyone on camera in public, with Waters sitting right there, exactly what crime she committed. Then they can't say it is political because they can see the evidence themselves." "When do you want the briefing materials ready?" Torres asked. 4 weeks. I want to review everything twice. Make sure it is airtight, because once I dropped this in a congressional hearing, there is no taking it back. And that is how Kash Patel ended up sitting in front of the House Financial Services Committee, about to publicly destroy one of Congress's most powerful members, using her own emails and bank records. Chairman McHenry gave the room back to order after the chaos following Patel's opening bombshell and said, "Director Patel, you have made extraordinary allegations. You have the floor to present your evidence." Patel stood up, walked around the witness table, and positioned himself where everyone could see him like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I am about to present is the result of 18 months of investigation by career FBI agents and forensic accountants. Every fact I am going to state is documented in our case file. Every email I am going to reference has been verified as authentic, and every financial transaction has been confirmed through bank records. I am going to tell you 4 stories. First, how Congresswoman Waters used her position to secure $12 million in taxpayer bailout money for a bank her family had invested in. Second, how she funneled over $1 million in campaign money to her daughter through a fake consulting company. Third, how she accumulated $6.4 million in wealth that she can't explain and won't account for. And fourth, how she lied on federal forms, lied to ethics investigators, and lied to the American people to cover it all up. Let's start with September 2008, the financial crisis, and a desperate phone call. Patel's voice was conversational, almost folksy, but every word was chosen exactly. September 2008. If you remember that month, it was terrifying. Lehman Brothers collapsed on the 15th. The stock market was in freefall. Banks were failing every week, and people were pulling their money out. Panic was everywhere. And Sidney Williams, Congresswoman Waters' husband, was watching $500,000 disappear. Sidney had made a big bet, having invested between $250,000 and $500,000 in a bank called One United. It was a minority-owned bank that served communities in Boston and LA. A small bank with a good mission. But in September 2008, it was dying. Like hundreds of other banks that month, One United was drowning in bad loans and panicked withdrawals. And if it went under, Sidney's investment, his and Maxine's nest egg, would evaporate. Now most people in that situation are helpless. You watch your money disappear, and there is nothing you can do. But Maxine Waters wasn't most people. She sat on this committee, the Financial Services Committee. She had Treasury officials' phone numbers. She had power. So on September 9th, Kevin Cohey, One United's CEO, sent an email to Waters' chief of staff. Patel paused and pulled out a printed email obtained through grand jury subpoena. It reads, "As you know, One United is facing significant challenges due to the financial crisis. We desperately need access to TARP funds. Without federal assistance, we may not survive. Can the Congresswoman help us get a meeting with Treasury?" The next day, September 10th, Waters' office contacted Treasury and requested a meeting, saying Waters wanted to discuss TARP funding for minority-owned banks. Treasury agreed, and the meeting was scheduled for September 12th, 2 days away. But here is what Treasury officials didn't know, what Waters never told them. Her husband owned One United stock. She had a direct financial interest in One United getting federal money, and she was about to walk into that meeting and advocate for her family's investment using taxpayer funds. Representative Patrick McHenry interrupted, asking, "Director Patel, aren't members allowed to help arrange meetings with federal agencies?" "Absolutely, congressional men. But they are required to disclose financial conflicts of interest, and they are supposed to recuse themselves when they have a personal stake in the outcome." And Waters did neither. Let me tell you what happened in that meeting. Patel started pacing slightly like he told a story to friends. September 12th, 2008, Treasury Department headquarters. Present were Treasury officials, Federal Reserve representatives, Congressional Budget Office staff, and One United executives. Also present was Maxine Waters. We have the meeting notes taken by a Treasury Department official who has proven before the grand jury. According to those notes, Waters opened the meeting by talking about the importance of minority-owned banks, how they served communities that big banks ignored, and how letting them fail would be discriminatory. All good points? True points. Then she got specific. She said One United Bank needed to be included in TARP funding, that without help, it would fail and harm the minority communities it served. Treasury officials raised concerns, saying One United had management problems and poor lending practices, and it didn't meet TARP criteria for systemically important institutions. Waters got insistent. According to the notes communities, and I am quoting here, Reverend Waters stated that failing to support One United would be discriminatory and would harm minority populations. She requested that Treasury give One United special consideration, given its role serving minority populations. Patel stopped pacing and looked directly at Waters. "What you didn't tell anyone in that room, Congresswoman, was that your husband owned up to $500,000 of One United stock, that if One United failed, your family lost everything, and that you had arranged this meeting not primarily to help communities, but to save your money. But it gets worse." He pulled out another document. "The day before that meeting, September 11th, you sent an email to your husband with the subject line, 'One United Situation.' Let me read it to you. Sydney, I spoke with Kevin today." Patel looked up, saying, "That is Kevin Cohey, One United CEO. He is very worried about the bank surviving the crisis. I have arranged a meeting with Treasury for Friday. I am going to push hard for them to include One United in TARP. We can't let the bank fail. Too much at stake. We will keep you updated." He set the email down. Too much at stake. Not the community needs this bank. Not minority banking is important. Too much at stake for you, for Sydney, for your investment. While the chaos of the room swirled around them, Kash Patel remained standing, an island of calm amid the rising storm, waiting for the cacophony to subside, just enough for him to deliver the final, fatal blow to Maxine Waters' defense, knowing that while proving financial fraud strips a politician of their integrity, proving they lied under oath strips them of their freedom. When Chairman McHenry finally hammered the room into a fragile silence, Patel did not return to his seat, but instead took a step closer to the dais, bridging the physical gap between the law enforcement officer and the suspect, his voice shifting from the clinical tone of an auditor to the thunderous gravity of a federal prosecutor delivering a closing argument in a capital case. "Congresswoman, we have discussed the money, the shell companies, and the fraud. But now we must discuss the truth, because when ethics investigators and federal agencies began asking uncomfortable questions about the origins of these illicit funds, you did not choose the path of confession or confession, but rather you chose to compound your crime by lying repeatedly and under oath." Patel raised a document stamped with the official seal of the Office of Congressional Ethics, holding it like a weapon. "In 2020, when this body sent you a formal inquiry demanding an explanation for the $85,000 payment you received from Financial Consulting Associates, that Delaware shell company we just discussed, you responded, in writing on May 14th, asserting under penalty of perjury that this sum was a compensation for personal funds you had advanced to cover the costs of a community event. That was your sworn explanation. Yet the FBI subpoenaed the bank records of Financial Consulting Associates before it dissolved. And do you know what we found? We found absolutely no expenditures for any community event, no invoices, no receipts, and no withdrawals, other than the single wire transfer sent directly to you. Your statement to the Ethics Office was a brazen falsehood designed to conceal taxable income, and lying to federal investigators is a felony under Title 18, United States Code Section 1505, constituting obstruction of justice. Patel let the document fall onto the table, the sharp slap of paper on wood echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. Before he reached for the next piece of evidence, a transcript of her testimony from 2012. Let us revisit 2012, when you swore before God and the Constitution to tell the truth to the House Ethics Committee regarding the One United Bank bailout. You confirmed then that you had absolutely no knowledge of your husband's stock holdings in that bank at the time you arranged the meeting with the Treasury Department, claiming your advocacy was purely coincidental and born of altruism. But today, we possess the email you sent to your husband on September 11th, 2008, the very day before that meeting, in which you explicitly wrote, "I will push hard to protect our investment." You committed perjury, Congresswoman. You looked your colleagues in the eye and lied to protect your political career when in reality, you were protecting your family's net worth. And that is perjury in the first degree, a crime for which there is no statute of limitations when it involves the betrayal of the public trust. Waters had collapsed into her chair, her eyes darting frantically around the room, seeking an ally, a friendly face, or an exit. But her Democratic colleagues were studying their shoes or their phones, physically leaning away from her, as if her corruption were contagious. Patel's voice dropped to a register that was colder and more terrifying than shouting. In total, our investigation has identified 8 years of falsified consecutive financial disclosure forms concealing over $2 million in income, 3 distinct instances of perjury under oath, and a pattern of money laundering utilizing 11 separate shell companies. You are not a careless legislator. You are the CEO of a criminal enterprise operating out of a congressional office, turning your public service into a marketplace where influence is sold to the highest bidder, and taxpayer money is funneled into your private accounts. He turned his gaze to Chairman McHenry, who sat stunned on the raised platform. Mr. Chairman, the FBI has concluded its investigation, and this morning, prior to my arrival here, I signed a formal referral to the Department of Justice, recommending the immediate criminal indictment of Representative Maxine Waters on 34 federal counts, including bank fraud, campaign finance violations, money laundering, perjury, and obstruction of justice. Furthermore, we are recommending that this committee strip her of all assignments and refer her to the IRS for the recovery of 2 decades of evaded taxes. Because the halls of Congress are not a sanctuary for felons, and a congressional pin is not a shield against the rule of law. Patel closed his binder with a decisive snap that signaled the end of an era. Looking at Waters one last time, not with anger, but with the pity one reserves for a tragedy of one's own making. You said in your email that you did it all to protect your investment, and congratulations, Madam Congresswoman, you protected it for 15 years, but the cost of that protection is now your freedom. 48 hours after the hearing that shook the foundations of Washington, at exactly 6 a.m., a convoy of black FBI SUVs rolled silently to a halt in front of the $6 million mansion in Hancock Park, Los Angeles. There were no sirens, no dramatic announcements, only the grim professionalism of federal agents executing a warrant. The image that flashed across the screens of CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News was searing and indelible. Maxine Waters, the woman who had once seemed invincible, emerged from her front door with her hands cuffed behind her back, her face devoid of makeup and etched with the sudden, crushing weight of reality, stripped of her power and her pretense. The chyron scrolling beneath the footage was stark. FBI arrests Maxine Waters. 34 federal charges. The indicted, released shortly thereafter, was a 94-page catalog of corruption that detailed every wire transfer, every fabricated invoice, and every lie told to conceal the theft. The trial, held 6 months later in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., captivated the nation, as Waters' high-priced defense team attempted to paint the prosecution as a political hit job, a narrative that crumbled to dust against the mountain of documentary evidence Kash Patel's team had assembled. There was no defense for the Protect Our Investment email, no explanation for the shell companies that existed only to pay her, and no rebuttal to the bank records showing her daughter receiving campaign funds for work that was never performed. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for a mere 4 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all 34 counts. At the judging hearing, federal judge Reggie Walton, known for his stern impartiality, looked down at the limited figure of Maxine Waters standing before the bench. "Miss Waters," he began, his voice resonating through the packed courtroom, "you were entrusted with immense power to regulate the financial systems of this nation and to uphold the law. Yet you used that power as a weapon to enrich yourself and your family, stealing from taxpayers, deceiving voters, and staining the integrity of the United States Congress. You did not commit these crimes out of necessity or desperation, but out of a bottomless greed and an arrogant belief that you were above the law, and that is not merely a crime, it is a betrayal of the Republic. He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle before delivering the sentence. Given the systematic and prolonged nature of your corruption, I sentence you to 10 years for bank fraud, 8 years for campaign finance violations, 7 years for money laundering, and 5 years for perjury, to be served consecutively for a total of 25 years in federal prison. You are further ordered to pay restitution of $12 million to the Treasury, forfeit $3.2 million in ill-gotten assets, and you are permanently barred from holding public office. The gavel struck, signaling the end of one of the most powerful political careers in modern history, as Maxine Waters was led away to spend the remainder of her life in a federal penitentiary, leaving behind a legacy of corruption and a cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked power. In the aftermath, FBI Director Kash Patel appeared on 60 Minutes for his only interview regarding the case, sitting calmly as the interviewer asked if the prosecution was politically motivated. "It was not politics, it was the law," Patel replied, looking directly into the camera. "If we had refused to investigate her simply because she was a powerful Democrat, that would have been the political act. That would have been cowardice. Justice is blind to party affiliation and power. Maxine Waters committed crimes, and she is facing the consequences just as any other citizen would, sending a clear message to everyone in Washington that no one is untouchable." His approval ratings soared, not just among Republicans, but among independents and disillusioned Democrats who saw in the prosecution a return to the principle of equal justice. Congress subsequently passed the Congressional Financial Transparency Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. Powerful, strict new rules on legislative stock trading and financial disclosures, a final, ironic legacy of Waters' downfall. In federal prison, inmate number 83452-016 sat in a small cell, far removed from the committee rooms and television studios of her past. She had indeed protected her investment, just as she had promised. But in doing so, she had forfeited the only thing that truly mattered: her liberty and her name. The story of her fall became a permanent chapter in American political history, a testament to the fact that in the battle between corruption and justice, when there are those brave enough to hold the line, the truth will ultimately prevail. And so, the empire of Maxine Waters crumbled, not by the ballot box, but by the weight of her own words written in the intoxication of greed. September 3rd, 2016. Cash deposit of $45,000 to Sidney Williams's account. Cash, no documentation of source, just 45,000 inches cash walked into a bank and deposited. March 22nd, 2018, wire transfer of $125,000 to a joint account from a real estate company in Florida called Sunshine Property Management, described as property transaction. We contacted Sunshine Property Management, and they said they never did business with Waters, never sent her money, have no record of any transaction. The wire came from an account that was closed 2 weeks after the transfer. July 14th, 2019, wire transfer of $95,000 to Karen Waters' account from a corporation called Strategic Advisors Group, registered in Nevada, described as contract payment. Strategic Advisors Group, registered in March 2019, made this one payment in July. Dissolved in October 2019, 6-month lifespan, single payment, then gone. Patel stopped pacing and looked around the room, asking if they see the pattern. Shell companies in Delaware, Nevada, Florida, generic names like financial consulting or strategic advisors, short operational lives of 6 months to a year, Single payments to Waters family members, then dissolved, so you can't trace the beneficial owners. This is textbook money laundering. Create a shell company. Use it to make a payment that can't be traced back to the real source. Dissolve the company so investigators hit a dead end. We identified 11 different shell companies that made payments to Waters family accounts between 2015 and 2024, with total payments of $1,247,000. Representative Bill Huizenga spoke up, with a tight voice asking Director Patel, in his experience prosecuting financial crimes, what that pattern suggests. It suggests someone with a lot of money was paying Maxine Waters, and they went to enormous lengths to hide who was paying her and why. If these were legitimate consulting fees or speaking fees, there would be contracts, tax reporting, and public disclosure on her financial forms. But these payments were deliberately structured to avoid detection. Here's what else we know. And this is from Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. Patel pulled out another document. 15 separate banks filed suspicious activity reports about Waters' family accounts between 2015 and 2024. Banks are required to file SARs when they see transaction patterns that suggest money laundering. And every one of these SARs flagged the same concerns. Structuring deposits just under $10,000 to avoid reporting requirements, round numbers, like payments of exactly $85,000 or $45,000 or $125,000. When legitimate business transactions usually aren't perfect round numbers, cash deposits of large amounts, when legitimate income is usually paid by check or wire transfer, shell companies making payments from entities that can't be traced, and geographic dispersal, with money coming from Delaware, Nevada, Florida, New York, all over the country, with no clear business connection. And here's what makes it especially suspicious. Maxine Waters sits on the Financial Services Committee. She regulates banks. She regulates financial institutions. She has enormous power over the industry, and someone in that industry was paying her through shell companies designed to hide the payments. Representative Jim Himes, a Democrat, asked carefully, "Director Patel, are you alleging these were bribes?" And Patel replied, "I'm alleging that someone paid Maxine Waters approximately $8 million through deliberately obscured channels. Whether those payments were bribes for her votes, kickbacks for her help with regulatory issues, or proceeds from other criminal activity, we're still investigating. But I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like public corruption. It looks like a powerful congresswoman selling her influence to people who could pay. And it looks like she went to great lengths to hide it." Patel walked back to his seat and took another drink of water, summarizing what they've found. One United Bank fraud, where she used her congressional position to secure $12 million in TARP funds for a bank her family invested in, and admitted in emails, she did it to protect our investment. Family enrichment fraud, where she paid her daughter's shell company $1.2 million for fake services and funneled $850,000 to her daughter as personal income, and unexplained wealth, where she accumulated $4 million in net worth on a $174,000 salary, with $1.8 million in deposits from shell companies that can't be explained. But there's one more thing we need to talk about, because when ethics investigators and federal agencies started asking questions about all this money, Maxine Waters didn't tell the truth. She lied on federal forms under oath to Congress, and those lies are federal crimes too. Patel's voice was matter-of-fact now, almost clinical, explaining that members of Congress file financial disclosure forms every year under penalty of perjury, swearing under oath that the information is true and complete, requiring reporting of all sources of income over $200, all assets worth more than $1,000, all outside positions, and any agreements for future employment for the purpose of transparency. Let me show you what Maxine Waters reported and what she didn't. Patel held up her 2015 financial disclosure, the year she received $85,000 from Financial Consulting Associates. Under income, she reported congressional salary $174,000, spouse retirement pension $45,000, stock dividends $8,500, for total non-congressional income $53,500. Notice what's missing. The $85,000 payment is nowhere on this form, which is a false statement on a federal disclosure form filed under penalty of perjury. He pulled out another form, the 2018 disclosure, the year she received $125,000 from that Florida real estate company, reported non-congressional income $62,000, the $125,000 payment not reported, another false statement. We found 8 years where she received payments through these shell companies that weren't reported on her financial disclosures. Total undisclosed income, $1,247,000. That's not forgetting to list one stock dividend. That's systematic omission of over $1 million in income. Representative Josh Gottheimer asked, "Could these have been honest mistakes?" And Patel replied, "Let me show you why they weren't mistakes." Patel pulled out a letter from 2020, where the Office of Congressional Ethics sent Waters a letter, identifying some of these suspicious transactions and asking her to explain them. She wrote back 3 weeks later, and Patel read part of her response. "I have reviewed the transactions you referenced. These were not income that required disclosure. They were either reimbursements for expenses I had previously paid, loan repayments from family members, funds transferred between my own accounts, or gifts from family members below reporting thresholds. None required disclosure under House ethics rules." Patel sat down the letter, stating that response was false, and we can prove it. She claimed the $85,000 from Financial Consulting Associates was a reimbursement for expenses, but we subpoenaed that company's bank records before it dissolved, and there's no record of Waters ever paying them anything that would need reimbursement. This wasn't a reimbursement. It was a payment to her. A payment she never reported. She claimed some transfers were gifts from family members, but federal law requires reporting gifts over $390 and reporting who gave the gift, and she didn't report any gifts because these weren't gifts, they were payments she was hiding. She lied to the Office of Congressional Ethics, and because that lie was material to their investigation, it is obstruction of justice. Patel pulled out more documents saying the lies didn't stop there. In 2012, when the House Ethics Committee was investigating the One United matter, Waters testified under oath, saying she didn't personally arrange the Treasury meeting, said her chief of staff did it without her knowledge, said she didn't know about Sydney's One United investment when she attended the meeting. All lies, and we've now proven it with emails. She told ethics investigators she didn't know about the investment, but she signed tax returns, reporting One United dividend income, and you don't sign a tax return without reading it. She said she didn't arrange the meeting, but we have her email to Sydney the day before saying, "I've arranged a meeting with Treasury." She said she was just trying to help minority banking, but we have her email after One United got the money saying, "This will protect our investment." She lied under oath to a congressional committee. That's perjury under Title 18, United States Code Section 1621, carrying up to 5 years in federal prison. Patel organized his documents to summarize the false statements. 8 years of false financial disclosure forms, 8 separate violations of Title 18 Section 1001, false statements to the Office of Congressional Ethics during their 2020 investigation constituting obstruction of justice, perjury to the House Ethics Committee during the 2012 One United investigation, under Title 18 Section 1621, and multiple false statements to IRS on tax returns about sources of income constituting tax fraud. The lies alone are worth decades in federal prison. But combined with the underlying crimes, the bank fraud, the campaign fraud, the money laundering, we are looking at a systematic criminal enterprise run by a sitting member of Congress. Patel walked to the front of the room and stood directly in front of Maxine Waters, stating, "Congresswoman, you've spent 32 years on this committee. You've investigated financial crimes, you've demanded accountability from banks and corporations, you've lectured others about transparency and ethics. But the evidence shows that you are exactly what you claim to oppose. You used your position to enrich your family. You took money from hidden sources through shell companies. You lied on federal forms. You committed perjury to cover it up. You're not a reformer. You're not a watchdog. You're a corrupt politician who got caught." The room was dead, silent, as Patel turned to Chairman McHenry, saying, "Mr. Chairman, the FBI has completed its investigation, and we're recommending that the Department of Justice file criminal charges against Representative Waters for bank fraud, campaign finance violations, wire fraud, honest services fraud, money laundering, making false statements to federal agencies, perjury, and obstruction of justice, approximately 34 separate federal felonies. We're also recommending that the House Office of Congressional Ethics begin immediate expulsion proceedings, and we're referring this matter to the IRS for civil and criminal tax enforcement. Representative Maxine Waters should not be sitting in Congress. She should be preparing for trial." He sat down, and the hearing room exploded into chaos. But through all the shouting and camera flashes, one image dominated. Maxine Waters sitting at her desk, surrounded by lawyers, her career destroyed by 18 months of FBI investigation, and her own emails admitting she'd committed fraud to protect our investment. 48 hours later, the images played on every network. FBI agents arriving at Waters' Capitol Hill office at 6 a.m., the perp walk as she was escorted out in handcuffs, the booking photo that would define her legacy, not as the powerful committee member or the banking regulator, but as the criminal defendant. CNN breaking news: FBI arrests Rep. Maxine Waters on 34 federal charges. MSNBC: Waters charged with bank fraud, money laundering, perjury. Fox News: FBI arrests Waters' One United Fraud Family Enrichment Shell Companies. The indictment was 94 pages detailing bank fraud, campaign finance violations, wire fraud, honest services fraud, money laundering, 8 counts of false statements, 3 counts of perjury, and obstruction of justice, totaling 34 federal felony counts. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and the defense had no answer to the emails, no explanation for the shell company payments, and no rebuttal to the bank records showing Karen Waters receiving campaign money for work that wasn't done. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found her guilty on all 34 counts. Sentencing 4 months later saw federal judge Reggie Walton deliver the sentence in a packed Washington courtroom, saying, "Miss Waters, you held a position of enormous trust, regulating the financial institutions that make our economy function. You had oversight over the FBI. You had power, and you abused that power systematically for 20 years. You used your position to secure $12 million in taxpayer money for a bank your family invested in. You admitted in writing, you did it to protect our investment, not to help communities, but to enrich yourselves. You funneled over $1 million in campaign donations to your daughter through a fake company. Money that voters gave to support your campaign went instead to enrich your family. You took nearly $2 million in payments from shell companies designed to hide who was paying you, and you never reported any of it. Then, when investigators asked questions, you lied on federal forms under oath to ethics committees for years. This wasn't one mistake. This was systematic corruption over 2 decades. I sentence you to bank fraud 10 years, campaign finance violations 8 years consecutive, money laundering 7 years consecutive, perjury and false statements 5 years concurrent, total 25 years in federal prison. You must serve at least 85% before parole eligibility. approximately 21 years. You will forfeit all assets obtained through criminal conduct, approximately $2 million, and you are permanently barred from holding federal office. Miss Waters, you betrayed your constituents, your colleagues, and your country. You used power for personal enrichment, and now you will spend the rest of your productive life in prison. FBI Director Kash Patel gave one interview after the conviction to CBS's 60 Minutes, saying this wasn't political. This was following evidence. The evidence showed crimes, so we prosecuted. That's how the justice system is supposed to work. Would I have preferred not to investigate a sitting congresswoman? Sure. It's complicated. It's politically sensitive. People immediately claim partisan motivation. But what's the alternative? We don't investigate powerful Democrats because it might look political? That's not equal justice. That's a two-tiered system where the powerful get away with crimes because they're powerful. Maxine Waters committed bank fraud. She enriched her family through campaign finance violations. She took money from shell companies she couldn't explain, and she lied about all of it for years. If we had ignored that because she was a prominent Democrat, what would that say about the FBI? That would prove everything people say about the deep state protecting its own. We presented the evidence publicly at her own committee hearing. Let everyone see it. Then DOJ filed charges. She got due process. A jury of her peers convicted her. The system worked. And yes, I know some people will always claim this was political, but those are the people who would defend Maxine Waters no matter what evidence we presented. You can't make everyone happy. You can only follow the law and prosecute crimes when you find them. That's what we did. His approval ratings remained high. Overall, 68%, Republicans 89%, Independents 71%, Democrats 41%. Even many Democrats couldn't defend the evidence. For America, Congress passed the Congressional Financial Transparency Act with bipartisan support, requiring real-time financial disclosure within 30 days of any transaction over $5,000. Mandatory reporting of all payments from LLCs and shell companies, a ban on family members receiving campaign funds above market rates, independent audits of congressional finances, and automatic FBI referral for suspicious activity reports involving members. The Waters case became the definitive example of congressional corruption. Law schools taught it, the FBI used it in training, and it was the precedent that no one, regardless of race, gender, or political party, was above the law. 1 year later, Kash Patel sat in his FBI director's office reviewing the latest statistics on public corruption prosecutions, and the Waters case had opened floodgates with other members under investigation, witnesses coming forward, and banks reporting suspicious activity they'd previously ignored. His deputy knocked, saying, "Sir, there's another member of Congress with suspicious financial patterns." FinCEN sent over a referral. "What do you want to do?" Patel smiled, not a happy smile but a knowing smile, and said what we always do: follow the evidence. If it shows crimes we prosecute, equal justice doesn't take vacations. Because in Washington corruption would always exist, politicians would always think they could get away with it, and powerful people would always believe the rules didn't apply to them. But as long as there were investigators like Kash Patel, smart enough to build airtight cases, brave enough to prosecute the powerful, and principled enough to ignore politics, there would be accountability. Maxine Waters had thought she was untouchable, protected by her position, shielded by her seniority, defended by claims of racism and persecution. She'd been wrong. The country lawyer from Louisiana had proved that with patience, evidence, and courage, even the most powerful can be held accountable, and 25 years in federal prison gave Waters plenty of time to think about the emails that destroyed her. This will protect our investment. She'd protected her investment, but she couldn't protect herself from justice.